Well, thank you very much. And I really think here today it's a real sign of how much political progress we're making, the interest of the MPs and the size of this room. It's great to see. I thought I'd begin very briefly by reading out a few sentences from the Green Party policy. The Green Party policy says, criminalisation of many parts of the sex industry leaves those working within it in a vulnerable position. They are often unable to turn to the law for help where their rights are violated. Talking about what should happen, all aspects of sex work involving consenting adults should be decriminalised. There should be zero tolerance of coercion, violence or sexual abuse in sex work, and public services, the government and the legal system should aim to end those social attitudes which stigmatise those who are or have been sex workers. So that's what the policy is. I thought it might be useful to look back over the history to see how we ended up with that policy, particularly thinking of the MPs who might be looking to change their own party's policies. Now, it was actually long before I joined the Green Party this policy was made. I think it was about 12 or 14 years ago. And what happened was a couple of people who were working on policy in the Green Party went to the unions who represent sex workers, went to representatives of sex workers' organisations, gathered the evidence together, and drawing on that evidence base, wrote this policy. That, I think, is something that's quite typical of the Green Party. I think I would claim, have probably more evidence-based policy than any other party. Drug policy and climate change policy are two of the others. And from what I hear, it passed very comfortably. In the Green Party, all policy is made by the members. Conference is sovereign. So if I ask you to reflect for a second, there were actually hundreds of people in a room who carefully considered that policy and overwhelmingly voted to support it. That was how the Green Party members felt. But what happened, and this is probably 6 to 8 years ago when I became involved, at that point in time, Green Party policy was under considerable challenge, particularly from proponents of the Swedish model. Now, the way policy is changed in the Green Party is often fringes are held at conference, people try to establish a consensus among members, and that changes policy. And I found myself in some rooms crowded like this one, sometimes quite uncomfortably defending the policy against some people presenting very emotional arguments from the other side. People presenting arguments about, 14-year-olds who've been dragged into street work, who've been forced into prostitution, who had drug and alcohol and mental health problems. And I found me, just as a person who'd read the evidence and knew about this, I found it was a real challenge. I had some pretty tough meetings. But what I found, and what I've worked with the English Collective of Prostitutes and others, what I found that defeated that push within the Green Party was we had a series of meetings at Green Party conference where we actually had sex workers and former sex workers came and talked simply about their experiences, about how criminalisation had affected them. And the last meeting that the other side, you might say, those propounding the Swedish model, called, I think they had 5 people turned up. And that was the point when they recognised they were not going to change Green Party policy. So I think what has happened is, we went to the evidence and then we got faced with a whole lot of emotion, and that was a challenge. And really you've got to tackle emotion with emotion as well as the evidence. And I think what we've been hearing, for example, just from Thailand, the reality that around the world, so many sex workers are single mums. And really what is behind sex work for many people, particularly those who might not want to get into sex work, is a lack of money. Yeah. That's where it lies. And what we're seeing in Britain now is cuts to benefits with low wages and 0-hour contracts. Many women are being forced into sex work because they have no alternative. So I think there's a two-pronged attack we need to make here. We need to absolutely defend the rights of sex workers, the right to do sex work, and to make that as absolutely safe as we possibly can. And we know all the evidence of how we do that. But we also very much need to make sure that no one is being forced into sex work, and anyone who wants to get out of it can get out of it. And sometimes those look like two contradictory things, but they're not. We've got to argue those two cases. I think in the Green Party we've got a very strong track record now, and I think we're starting to see a political shift which is tremendously exciting. And just one sentence more. What I'll reflect on is I actually once, a few years back, was in probably this very room, and I had a successive abortion rights meeting followed by a sex workers meeting. And at that abortion rights meeting, people were reflecting back very sadly on more than a decade of a Labor government, in which Labor women there proudly told me it was Labor Party policy to remove lots of the unnecessary restrictions on abortion in Britain and to decriminalise abortion, and they hadn't done it. So I think there's a real political opportunity here. Now is the time to not just say, defend what we've got, but seize actually a real change in the law to get to the right evidence-based law here in Britain. Thank you.